Hi, I'm Ben Secret, and this month we're going to be looking at Photoshop's new and improved image processor, Adobe Camera Raw 7. And to demonstrate some of the new features, I'm going to be attempting to crudely emulate the look of Kodak Portrait 100 film. And it's worth noting at this point, Camera Raw is not just for editing RAW files, you can also use it to edit your regular JPEGs too. Now the first thing we're going to do is edit the white balance, and you can see here the picture's way too yellow. So we're just going to bring that down to blue until we get a reasonable balance of colours. And we can also use the tint slider if we see there's too much green or too much magenta. The exposure here is okay as this is a fairly dark shot and there's nothing being lost into the shadows. So here I'm just going to focus on upping the contrast until we've got just enough tone where we need it. And then what I'm going to do is bring the highlights and whites down a bit just to control the top end. And bring the shadows and blacks up just to create that kind of faded, slightly washed out look which is typical of film photography. And I'm just going to add a bit of saturation. The key to this film look is striking a balance between a contrasty image and a slightly washed out looking image. We want to avoid any crushed blacks or blown out highlights, and also keep the colours vibrant and just slightly unnatural with a few tints. And now we can go over to our tone curves. So just to add a bit more contrast, I'm going to boost the lights and just slightly soften the highlights. And this is again keeping with the kind of film-like highlight curve. And now we can switch over to our point curve, and here I'm really going to bump up the faded look. And to this I'm just going to drag the black point up to about 20 or 30. And then just bring the mid-tones down again, about midway. And I'm just going to balance this up with a bit more contrast with a kind of modified S-curve. And now for one of Camera Raw 7's new features, I'm going to select the red curves channel. So I'm just going to add a slight red tint to the midtones. And going over to the green channel, I'm just going to add a bit of green to the shadows. And we're going to do the same on the blue. And a personal preference when trying to emulate film is to turn all the sharpening off. And another thing we've got in Camera Raw is this very detailed colour specific processing. So we can see the green lights on the top of our image are a problem, and they look slightly blown out and like a bit of a green blur. So here I'm just going to turn the saturation and luminance down slightly in the greens. And I'm also going to go back to our basic panel and turn the saturation down now we've added a bit more colour to the image. And now split toning is another really easy way to add tints to highlights and shadows. And here I'm going to add a kind of cool blue tint to the highlights. And I'm just going to balance that all the way over to -88. So it's really only adding a slight coolness to the very brightest parts of the image. And now in camera calibration we can add some more tints, so I'm just going to add a bit more green to the shadows. And we can finish the whole thing off with a bit of a grain effect. So as you can see, Camera Raw is a nice alternative to the usual Photoshop workflow. And in some ways, for designing looks like this, it can be a lot quicker.